Symposium, but we'll just very quickly go through what is EPSA and get you on the same page with everything we do and show you the opportunities that you can use. I don't have to really introduce myself, but my name is Josef Kuhn. I'm originally from Czech Republic, and I'm the EPSA president for this mandate. EPSA has very rich history that's spanning from 1978, when it was established, moving to almost present since 2013. We are based in Brussels, Belgium, in the EPSA house, where our interns work and live. And in present, we are here in Lyon at our annual congress. As you can guess from the name, we are European Pharmaceutical Students Association, and we are representing over 100,000 pharmaceutical students from 37 countries and 42 member associations. You can probably find your country, so you can see. What we are trying to do is to actively engage with all of the students, but also professionals, to make the connection between these two worlds and bring the best of both of them, and especially for students to help them in their future, both studying but also professional, once they will reach that stage of their studies and they will be graduated. Very quickly, this is the structure of EPSA. I don't want to be going into it too much, but General Assembly that will be happening from tomorrow is our highest decision body that is meeting twice in a mandate during autumn and once in spring, and that's where all the important decisions concerning all of the members are taking place. Moving to our project and activities, we will start with events. So altogether, we have 4 events during the year: annual congress, annual summer assembly, and summer university. There's one more on the next slide that I'll take a bit more in a detail. But overall, during the year, more than 1,000 students meet around Europe to discuss, to learn, and to have fun during the educational program, but also during the social evenings and just mingling during coffee breaks. So please do that, meet new friends, and hopefully you will make long-lasting relationships with people around Europe. And yes, as I said, there's one more event that we are doing, that is the annual reception. It's our event of excellence, when all of the work in the policy and advocacy area is being showcased. It's usually happening in the European Parliament. Hopefully we will be able to come back there and again present our work to different stakeholders. It's usually hosted by a member of European Parliament, and we are inviting our partners to discuss and to show your opinion on the topics that matter for you. Moving to alumni, as I said, we have quite rich history, and there's, I would say, hundreds of people in EPSA's history that dedicated their time and energy to push the association forward. And therefore, we are very grateful to have them, and we are doing internal some projects for them to still keep in touch, and at the same time to ask them and use their experience and knowledge when we need it. Moving forward to education, that is the core of why we are here, but we are also doing some extra educational activities and projects throughout the year. And if we'll move to them, we have Methodological Club, which is something between policy and educational work, where we gather your opinion on your studies, and we are trying to then leverage your answers in future with the stakeholders, so your studies can look how you want, so they will be up to your needs and your expectations. LEAP is our lifelong learning platform. There is a dedicated website where you can learn a bit more about possible paths after your studies and everywhere where pharmacy can lead you. Moving on to public health and social services, you've definitely seen our public health campaigns online or happening during the events. We have some planned during the annual congress as well. And this is just a small cute placeholder for Teddy Bear Hospital, which is one of the social services. It's when pharmacy students are going to kindergartens to talk to children that there's no reason to fear a pharmacist. It's usually done also with medical students because we as future healthcare professionals should collaborate. And last but not least, from education, or this slide is the EPSA training project, the dedicated project for all the EPSA trainers that are delivering soft skills to all of these students. Moving to scientific topics, we have EPSA students publication. We also have the Science Day, will be happening during this event. We have EPSA Science Monthly, feel free to find it on our webpage. And EPSA Science Excursion, again, we have several of them during this event, so hopefully you have chosen them and you will enjoy them. Moving on to public relations and what we do outwards. We have newsletter and we have activity booklet. We also have our website that is under reconstruction, but keep an eye, there might be some changes in future. And we have some monthly dose. I highly recommend you to subscribe to that to keep up with the latest news from EPSA. You can use that QR code later. And you can always find us on various social media. I won't be reading them all out, but take a picture of the handles and you can find us later. Moving on to external, that is very much dedicated to EPSA mobility. We have Twinet. Probably some of you already heard about that, but keep an eye on possibilities to travel to this with this exchange project to different countries around Europe and get in contact with pharmaceutical students in a bit more casual environment. And as I said at the beginning, you're doing various things for you to help you in your professional development, so you will be ready once you will reach that stage of your career or your studies. Some notes on our advocacy work. We are advocating on many topics connected to both education and healthcare in general. You can read them here. I won't be really going through them, but I would like to show a few that we did recently, which was the mental health survey. We gathered over 2,000 responses from 36 countries of Europe. Just recently we have published a position paper on this, which was done in collaboration with Mental Health Europe, and you can look out in future because we feel that mental health of pharmaceutical students is really important and we want to help you. As I said, we also have something on student mobility because mobility of students is really important and we want to give everyone the opportunity to see Europe or potentially the world. And we are very proud to be awarded third prize of EU Health Award for non-governmental organization in 2017. Hopefully we will be able to update the presentation in future with some different awards. Very quickly about our partners, because we wouldn't be nothing without them. We have Brussels-based, in this time also online-based, internships partners, which is FPI, the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Association, PGU, the Pharmaceutical Group of European Union, and Vaccines Europe. From the name you can guess they are focusing on vaccine industry. Very good more with professional partners, you can read them. It's important to point out that EPSA is funded by the European Commission funds, which we are very grateful for. As far for our external collaborations, that's some more professional organizations that we are working with. And going to all of the end, it's the students' collaborations, because we are not living in a vacuum of students' associations, so you can see them here. And lastly, corporate partners that are helping us very much in the cause we are trying to do. That is it. Thank you very much. I think I went 30 seconds over, but I hope you enjoyed it. I would like to give a request from for guide you through the symposium.
Thank you, Josef, for the very nice presentation. Now, as I know that you are all after lunch, and we all become a bit sleepy after we eat, let's do a bit of exercise, so if anyone can stand up a bit, please. I know, I'm kidding you. Okay, and now I have some questions for you. Since Josef presented to you EPSA, I'm curious how many of you actually attended EPSA events before. So I would like us to ask you to sit down if this is your first EPSA event. So I'm happy to see that there are so many newbies here, and I really hope you will enjoy it and will come to the next ones. Sit down, please, if this is your second EPSA event. Third event. Fourth. Fifth. Sixth. I see we have some winners here in the front. Seventh. Eighth event. So I hope to see as many of you in the next EPSA event as well, so you can stand up for longer. Now, because I'm also curious where you are coming from, we have a quick Slido for you, and also for you to learn how to use the app. You will need your phone, and we will use Slido also for Q&A session. All you have to do is to scan the QR code, or just join at slido.com and write the name EPSA AC21. And then Marlene, if you can activate the first workflow, please. There will be just a very simple question for you. What country are you from? So you will have to type there your country and to press on the send button. Okay, see that Norway is leading so far. Still Norway there, with Portugal a bit behind. And obviously a big number of French people. Romania also becoming bigger. I'm super proud of this. Okay, so I see that still Norway is leading. Great job, Norwegian people. I think it's the first time that we've seen in the events I'm attending since I've seen such a big Norwegian delegation to an event. So congrats. And now let's officially start our symposium. I'm gonna have a short speech for you, also with some more information on the educational program. And I would like to start with a short reflection on the latest period that happened. The past 2 years have been very challenging to all of us. The world almost completely stopped for a few months, and we did not know what to expect next and when we could get back to our lives. We were all affected by the pandemic in different ways, and most of us are still recovering from the damage it created to our physical and mental health. Now, we are finally starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and proof is the fact that we are able to be here today together instead of following this event via Zoom from home. If we look back at everything that happened during the pandemic, we can realize that it had a huge impact on the advancement of innovative approaches in the healthcare field, starting with the development of new medicines and vaccines, but also new ways of interacting with the patient and providing remote care. The use of real-world evidence and improving the collaboration across multiple stakeholders. The fact that we can now slowly go back to our lives is the result of extensive work done by the healthcare professionals, scientists, as well as the acknowledgement of the importance of innovation. Now more than ever, it is the right time to discuss about the developments in the healthcare and how the field would look like in the future. This is why the topic of our event is Pharmaceutical Revolution, aiming to bring perspective from different areas: community and hospital pharmacy, pharmaceutical and biotech industry, and regulatory affairs. We will have one symposium session today and 2 sessions tomorrow morning, and multiple workshop sessions that will aim to dive deeper into the advancements done in the healthcare field. Our trainers also prepared several training sessions that will focus on the soft skills that will help you develop personally and professionally. On Friday morning, the reception committee organized several science excursions for you that I am sure you will enjoy. And on Saturday, we will be having 2 public health campaigns and science day. I would like to thank all the speakers for being here with us to guide you towards discovering the future of the healthcare field, and to the reception committee for all the work they have been doing to make this event possible. I hope you will find the educational program interesting, and the learning you will be taking from this week will motivate you to dive deeper into the topics and increase your knowledge. I hope to see you participating in as many sessions as possible. Please keep in mind the attendance requirements for the educational program to allow you to join the social program and to receive the certificate of the event. So the symposium sessions today and tomorrow are mandatory, and it is also mandatory to join one more session today and tomorrow. On Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, as I said, you're allowed to miss one session. Friday and Saturday, all sessions are mandatory. And without further ado, we will officially start the presentation round with our first speaker, who unfortunately could not join us today, but he really wanted to talk to you about developments in the community pharmacy. So he provided us with a pre-recorded presentation. The speaker I'm talking about is Jan de Belly. He's a Belgian pharmacist working as a professional affairs advisor at the Pharmaceutical Group of the European Union, PGU, which is a European association representing community pharmacists in 32 European countries. His presentation is called Community Pharmacy 2030 at the Crossroads of Change. I hope you will enjoy it.
Everyone, my name is Jan Bailey. I work as the Professional Affairs Advisor at PGU, which is a European organization representing community pharmacists. I'm also a pharmacist by training, and I have been able to enjoy some very nice years within EPSA, so it's definitely with some regret that I'm not able to be there with you in person today. But unfortunately, this meeting is coinciding with our General Assembly in PGU, so I had to excuse myself. Community Pharmacy 2030 at the Crossroads of Change, and this is the title for this presentation, but which will concretely mean that I will give you an overview of some major trends and developments that are currently occurring in community pharmacy, and I will mainly do that based on 3 elements. So the COVID-19 pandemic, how has this changed the role that community pharmacists are having in healthcare systems? The vision that we as PGU and so European national pharmacy organizations have for the future, and then specifically also zooming in on what is the impact, the challenges, the opportunities of digital health for community pharmacy, of course within the context of the broader impact it will have on healthcare systems overall. So as mentioned, PGU, where we are the European organization representing national community pharmacy professional bodies and pharmacist associations across 32 European countries. And I'll start with indeed outlining the changing landscape for community pharmacy in Europe, after which I will also close my presentation with giving you some concrete examples of ongoing interesting developments and trends in community pharmacy. So the community pharmacy contribution during COVID-19. As I think you all know, community pharmacists, they have had a very important role in supporting local communities and ensuring continued access to treatments and care. What we've seen, and for instance, especially during the times of lockdown, but actually throughout this crisis, community pharmacies have been accessible 24/7. And that during these, for instance, lockdowns, community pharmacies were often one of the only healthcare providers and even public services that were still open and accessible to people. This means that also community pharmacy has been empowered in their role as being the first line of advice, treatment and referral for many European citizens on common ailments, and therefore is successfully preventing unnecessary visits to emergency rooms and other overburdened healthcare services. Other areas of, let's say, advancement that we have seen very rapidly during this COVID-19 pandemic was indeed structural involvement in COVID-19 vaccination and testing strategies in several countries. Then lastly, we can of course not forget on the fact of how COVID-19 has also advanced some developments in digital health because of the needs for patients. Also specifically think about home delivery services, which have been rapidly advanced again by community pharmacists in most European countries, really to be able to answer to the needs of patients, especially of vulnerable groups who had difficulties to access pharmacy services. The PGU study on pharmacy services, this is independent research that we commissioned during the COVID-19 pandemic, and which originally only had a focus on a general mapping of pharmacy services, but that we were then also be able to expand with having a particular focus on how or on which type of specific services have been installed in pharmacies as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And whilst I would like to speak to you about all the detailed results, I'm just sharing here the main findings in the interest of time. So this mapping exercise, again, on general pharmacy or in general on pharmacy services, but also on COVID-19, it revealed that currently today there is a very diverse range of pharmacy services that are provided across Europe, and which extend far beyond pharmacist dispensing roles. That means also in areas such as prevention and early detection, vaccination, but there's many more, chronic disease management and so on. These areas are increasingly becoming present in a number of European countries. And what we also see connected with that is that in terms of reimbursement, which is needed for pharmacy services to be sustainable and which also allow pharmacists to invest sufficient time in providing such professional services to patients, is that today there are 20 different pharmacy services that are currently reimbursed by the government or the healthcare payer outside the standard pharmacy dispensing remuneration. They've also looked at some evidence that is available in literature, and they have seen, for instance, particular positive evidence for screening and referral, chronic disease management, medication management, smoking cessation, adherence support, which is, of course, an absolute key challenge for all healthcare systems in Europe, but also in the world, flu vaccination, and then other examples such as, for instance, needle exchange services. What they also found is that there's still room for improvement in research on pharmacy services, and that's, of course, a call to pharmacy organizations and academia to make sure that we well record all the added value interventions that we bring to patients and healthcare systems on a daily basis. Zooming then in on the results that related to COVID-19 specifically, what, as I already revealed, we've seen a very rapid expansion of some expanded powers that were granted to pharmacists across Europe. And this includes then the extension or the expansion of also the legal scope, so meaning amended legislation, which make that pharmacists are allowed to provide certain tasks and services that they have not been able to do before. And one example is, for instance, the extension and the renewal of chronic prescriptions, but also, for instance, dispensing of certain medicines, which were only allowed to be dispensed in hospitals only before. And so, but overall, these services, they all are there to improve access to medication and relevant products, screen patients, and have this key role of pharmacists in referral, and being again this first line of contact for many people with the healthcare system. and also looking at support to vulnerable patients, again, which could be, for instance, elderly that have less mobility to come to the community pharmacy and are therefore served through a home delivery. But could also be the example of women who have been facing abuse at home, and where pharmacists were there in especially the lockdowns to as accessible centers where patients could report such services. All of this, it could drive value-based healthcare that makes best use of community pharmacies. And to illustrate that this is not only some findings that we have found in our study, increasingly we have also seen many international organizations making recommendations in line with the findings of the study, saying that crisis situations such as the coronavirus pandemic can really provide opportunities to change the traditional organization of the healthcare system and the role that the different healthcare providers have, and therefore should also consider expanding roles of pharmacists so that they can take on some of the tasks from doctors and thereby allow them to spend their time more effectively on the most complex cases. This leads really to one of the points that I will reinforce later about this integrated care model and the need for a good multidisciplinary collaboration in primary care, but also, of course, in connection with other healthcare services, such as in hospitals. In terms of our vision for 2030, as I mentioned, this is a vision that was constructed by the national pharmacy organizations across Europe and therefore shares the common values and principles that we have for community pharmacy. This vision, it was developed in 2019, so ahead or before the COVID-19 pandemic, but nevertheless you will see that many of the ongoing changes during the pandemic have also been reflected within this vision and therefore very much are aligned with this. This is clustered in 4 areas, and I'll zoom now in on these 4 areas to give you a bit more substance on what this vision concretely entails. Of course, I could speak to you for much longer about this, so I'll also advise you to have a look at the vision paper, which is fully publicly accessible on our website for more details and examples which are also mentioned there. But when we look at the first domain, ensuring quality of care and patient safety, I don't think I need to explain to you as pharmacy students that quality of care and patient safety is today and should always be the core of our profession. And so to give you some ideas on what that exactly means in the future or how that might change, as you are maybe aware, in several European countries, pharmacists already perform some more advanced clinical services, which are really focused on, again, better patient outcomes and which are there really to contribute to the safe, effective and rational use of medicines. This is, for instance, also done through a trend which we're increasingly seeing, the implementation of pharmacogenomics in pharmacies. This is really at its beginning. But for instance, the increased integration of additional data, so clinical data in pharmacies, which can be related to the pharmacogenomic parameters of patients, but also to other physiological parameters, such as think about renal function, think about other lab data, and that all through having access to electronically shared patient records. That also means that we need to work towards more integrated care models, as I already mentioned before, which we really focus on what are the needs of patients and how can we as an integrated healthcare team contribute to the optimal outcomes for the patient. And that's again where digital solutions, digital health solutions can really enhance collaboration and communication between healthcare professionals, but really also contribute again to improving that all of us being more of a trusted source of high quality information and sharing, also having a more digital connection with patients at home. Improving public health, that's an area where maybe compared with 20, 30 years ago, there's been an enormous progression and advancement in pharmacy practices. And I think the sentence, healthcare at the heart of the community, it says it all. I think that as a pharmacy today, we are already much more than a nexus point for medicines. No, we are there really as a very, again, accessible setting within local communities that provide a very broad range of healthcare services to patients. And not only about treatments, but very much so as well for prevention and, for instance, early detection of chronic diseases. And so that means also developing specific services in that area. Think about vaccination, smoking cessation services, but it also means, for instance, a key role is supporting self-care within local communities, meaning that through better patient education, we empower patients in terms of increased health literacy, but we also are, again, as pharmacies, that first line of advice where we can make patients stay within primary care, and where with our expertise and also, for instance, over-the-counter products, we can ensure that patients do not need to do or make unnecessary consultations in the healthcare system that could have been indeed resolved through advice from pharmacists already. Access, as I mentioned already a couple of times before, accessibility is one of the major strengths that we have as community pharmacists within healthcare systems. And in the future, we should, even more than we are already today, be a point of access for patients to their full range of treatments and healthcare products that can again contribute to prevention and, for instance, early detection of some diseases. Sustainability, that is a key word for healthcare systems and also in the broader context. But certainly we as a community pharmacy profession also need to be aware and be very conscious about how can we as a profession contribute to the sustainability of healthcare systems, because we all know that the funding of healthcare systems is under enormous pressure, even more so with, for instance, the COVID-19 pandemic. And therefore, for instance, community pharmacists also in the future will have a key role in, one example is collecting and generating real-world data that can lead to better informed decision-making for instance, regulators, but also health authorities, researchers, etc. We really, through our regular contact with patients, have an enormous potential to record the information, the data that we have, and that we observe with our patients in a more structural way, and again using that to contribute to the sustainability of healthcare systems. But therefore it's of course also crucial that community pharmacies remain financially sustainable to maintain the resilience of the healthcare systems. And very briefly, also in the interest of time, on digital health, because I think I already mentioned some elements, but pharmacy is of course, and how we interact with digital health is of course much more than only e-health, which is one key area of digital health, and meaning, for instance, electronic prescriptions and shared electronic health records, but for instance also mobile health applications and the increased presence of AI and automation. So that means an example is, for instance, pharmacy dispensing robots. They can free up time for community pharmacy teams so that they can use that time to invest more in all these new missions that we're having and these advanced patient care services. Telehealth is something that I may have not mentioned yet, but for instance, together with online pharmacy services, community pharmacies are of course also advancing in terms of their engagement model with patients, because we know of course that patients also today, they want to be digitally connected to a whole range of services, not only in healthcare, but certainly as community pharmacy, we're evolving towards models such as omni-channels, where we as a pharmacy are, even with our high physical accessibility, we also will connect and are connecting with patients beyond the consultation in the pharmacy through digital means. And that indeed, this slide, it summarizes many of such potential opportunities that I already mentioned. Quality of care, patient safety, but also multi-professional collaboration and communication, increasing health literacy and self-management of patients, which is another key factor to contribute to the sustainability of healthcare systems, automating administrative and logistical processes, but then again, and that's a key area where also community pharmacy has a lot of potential to grow in the coming years, is to further personalize healthcare service and improve therapy outcomes based on having increased access to healthcare data from patients. Then now I'll focus very briefly on some ongoing good practices and examples. I always try to include this in my presentations to make things a bit more concrete. And there's a lot of good practices I can choose from, based from different countries, but here I just have three very clear, I think, illustrative examples. But as said, in our publications that I mentioned also throughout this presentation, you'll find much more if you're interested. So, for instance, community pharmacists deliver vaccination. Today, community pharmacists are granted the legal rights to administer vaccines in pharmacies in 10 European countries. In 8 of such countries, that includes the administration of flu vaccines. But most recently, in Italy and Poland, pharmacists have also been granted administration rights for COVID-19 vaccines. And what we see is that what is the value of the service is that pharmacists are able to reach people who have never been vaccinated before, and that it also increases overall vaccination delivery rates while showing high satisfaction rates from users. There is some illustrative data that is displayed on this slide, for instance, from Ireland. And if you look, for instance, at data from France, on the overall impact that community pharmacists delivered vaccination services can have, you see, for instance, that whilst this service was actually only fully introduced or generally introduced in 2019, in the last flu season, community pharmacists in France already vaccinated more than 3.7 million people against flu last year, which means that 1 in 3 flu vaccinations was performed in a community pharmacy. On digital health and how pharmacists will also increasingly, let's say, advance engagement also through digital means. Here is an example from Denmark, where the Danish Pharmacy Association developed a general app for pharmacies called Apoteket, and where patients can and they can also select their tradition or the pharmacy that they're usually interacting with. This app brings together information about patients' medicines and is connected to all the relevant systems, from the shared medication card to, for instance, pharmacist storage systems. So this interoperability aspect, I think, is very important to highlight. What are some features? For instance, asking doctors to repeat prescriptions, see reimbursement statements and price, establish a fixed medicine order, choose also to have it delivered, but also in this app assist patients in the correct taking of their medicines, such as through app reminders, and see if the preferred pharmacy has the medicine you need in stock, which unfortunately is needed today because of the high presence of medicine shortages in pharmacies all across Europe. And moreover, this app is complemented through a chat function about where patients can ask general questions, for instance, about medicine, health, and prescription rules, etc. Then lastly, and this is about the accessible role that community pharmacists have as first-line advice. In Scotland, community pharmacists have been empowered during the COVID-19 pandemic, but they always had in Scotland this advanced role in terms of being this first port of call for patients with common ailments. They have installed the Pharmacy First service, and this service, it allows community pharmacies to give people expert help for treating conditions such as, for instance, sore throats, earache, cold sores, along with common clinical conditions such as urinary tract infections. And what it basically will allow is that, or what it will do is that community pharmacy teams, they will offer advice, treatment, or referral for certain defined conditions, some which I already mentioned, and which will also potentially, as an outcome, allow that community pharmacists, based on the protocols that are developed for analyzing symptoms of patients for such conditions, is that one possible outcome is that, for instance, pharmacists will be able to dispense a prescription-only medicine and as such prescribe the medicine for the patient directly. But of course, it's not only about that, it's also about, for instance, identifying when patients would need to be referred to other healthcare services, such as, for instance, an emergency department. And what is very clear to observe there is that the Scottish health authorities, they very much promote community pharmacy as the first place people should go for advice on common ailments. And again, I think that shows how, it's one example of how also in other countries, community pharmacies will play a much more integral part of the healthcare system and be there really as the frontline access point for patients on a very wide range of conditions, but also health-related questions. So to conclude, here are some takeaway messages. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, community pharmacists have been further empowered in their vital role in supporting local community by being this first line of advice, treatment, and referral, but also to ensure continued access to treatment and care for patients. Overall, a wide range of pharmacy services is accessible to patients across Europe today, and pharmacists are ready to enhance this contribution to help strengthen Europe's health systems. And we know that the traditional models of pharmacy and healthcare are changing, and they offer, in addition to, of course, some challenges, they offer tremendous opportunities for our profession as well, really to be these local healthcare hubs whilst being able to offer a wide range of services for prevention, health promotion, and treatment. And the digital technologies, they offer as well tremendous opportunities for achieving safe and effective healthcare and advancing also our practice, for instance, through saving of time that we can invest in other services. But, and that's something that I want to also stress, digital health is a tool and not an outcome in itself, and therefore digital health solutions also need to be designed according to the goals of healthcare and not vice versa. And then lastly, the main recommendations that we have in this regard as PGU is that the value of pharmaceutical services that have proven to improve people's quality of life and health systems sustainability should be recognized by expanding the legal scope of community pharmacy practice and adequately remunerating community pharmacists for the services they provide. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you all for, I hope, listening, because I'm of course not able to see you right now. But if you have any further questions, feel free to contact me. Here you have the general email address, pharmacy@pgu.eu, but also you can of course contact me through, for instance, social media, etc. I'm fully available for any questions you might have on this. So thank you very much also once again to EPSA for this opportunity to speak to you, and I wish you all a very nice rest of the conference. Thank you very much all.
Even though Jan was not here with us, we were thanking him for his availability and for his very nice presentation. And now I would like to invite on stage the next speaker, which is Anna Lozano, Director of Professional Development at EAHP, which is the European Association of Hospital Pharmacists. And she will be speaking today about the digital revolution in hospital pharmacy.
Thank you very much to the EPSA for inviting me to be here with you. I'm very happy to be here on behalf of the European Association of Hospital Pharmacies. As I only have 10 minutes, I would like to focus my presentation on the digital transformation and revolution in hospital pharmacy. This is a photo that I like very much about hospital pharmacies and what we do. This, I think it's some years ago, we were in the pharmacy departments, we were procurement, with the procurement of medicines, compounding, dispensing, but now our roles have changed and now we are all over the hospital. We are in wards, we are with all the healthcare team, we are with nurses, doctors, and of course we are with patients. So now I think we have moved from a hospital pharmacy to a clinical pharmacy, now a more specialized clinical pharmacy, and we are changing to a ambulatory care pharmacy because this is what the society needs from us. And our healthcare system has changed too. We have now the patient in the center of our healthcare. And around the patients, we have hospitals, we have a primary care, we have nursing homes, we have all the healthcare team, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, but the patient is the center. It's not the medicine, it's not the illness, it is the patient. And the patient has changed too. And now the patient wants to be a part of the treatment of the illness. They want to be informed, and we all live in a new life. We live in a digital life. So now we are changing too, and we have to adapt to this century and to these lives. Now patients are more outside the hospital and less in the hospital, so we have to move towards that. So that's because the EHP did on 2017 this position paper about e-health and health. And e-health consider, well, it is electronic health, and it refers to healthcare services provided by the support of information and communication technologies, such as computers or mobile phones. And in health, that is, mobile health refers to the use of smart or portable devices for health services and information. So we have considered 5 goals in this e-health and health that I would like to explain to you. First of goals is to achieve universal use of electronic prescribing, administration, and electronic medical records. This refers to prevent medical errors and to improve management of patients' care. And it is very important to highlight the importance of prevention of the use of patient data, because it is necessary to have a confidentiality, and we have to work with a protection data rules for that. And we believe now that we need in all Europe an interoperability of e-health records, and the European Union is working on that, and the EHP is supporting this interoperability. Second goal is the use of barcode scanning technology to promote patient safety in hospital through bedside scanning. And for that, the first step is to have barcoding of medicines to a single-use primary package at manufacturing stage. So we are asking all the pharmaceutical industry to have that, because we have to reach the 5 rights for patients. That is the 5 medicine, the right medicine, the right time, the right dose, the right route, and the right patient. So we have to think that we need a link between these electronic medical records, the barcoding scanning, to improve patient safety. And the third goal is the opportunities from InHealth for improving patient empowerment and self-management. And in this goal, I would like to tell something about telepharmacy. And this is an experience we have in Spain. I'm from Spain, and that we have, hello Spanish people, that we have during COVID-19 pandemic. And we consider telepharmacy the provision of pharmaceutical care at a distance through information and communication technologies. And to work with telepharmacy, we need the inclusion of patients in a telepharmacy program. That we follow a strict ethical criteria and accordingly based on the principle of equity. And this means that this telepharmacy is not only based on the medicine, on the illness, it is based on each individual patient and their needs. And the electronic medical record should be the basic information system used to provide telepharmacy services. And we consider 4 main telepharmacy activities, and they are the pharmacotherapeutic follow-up, the patient direct education and information dissemination, because it is very important that we have a patient that is educated in how to deal with these activities. We need clinical coordination, because we can't do this telepharmacy without the rest of the healthcare team, with nurses and doctors. And if we consider we have to have an informed home drug delivery. And this is a scheme of how to do it, how to do the follow-up. We have the remote consultation. We need schedules consultation with our patients, and this could be synchronous with phone calls or teleconferences, or could be chronous with, for example, emails. And we can have 2 and schedules consultations when the patient have some specific problems. And we use the remote monitoring with wearables app to, for example, monitor adherence or other parameters that we need to do this follow-up. And the pharmacotherapeutical goals are the same as we do in face-to-face pharmaceutical care, and are detection of drugs, drug interaction, detection of adverse events and early intervention, adherence management, pharmacotherapy review, and evaluation of health outcomes. And finally, these are two goals that are very important. One is the provision of appropriate health and health training opportunities to healthcare professionals, because the patients need to be trained, but I think we professionals need to be trained too. And we need to improve hospital pharmacies in hospital ICT design, specification of parameters and evaluation of ICT within the medicines processes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. Our next speaker will be joining us remotely via Zoom. I hope she's already there. It's Maud Peruda, Deputy Director General at AGP, which is the Association of the European Healthcare Industry in Brussels. She is responsible for providing strategic direction and coordinating EAGP activities regarding various EU and international regulatory developments impacting self-care products. And she will be talking about the renewed agenda for self-care products, changes and challenges in regards to its regulatory framework and the European self-care agenda. Maud, the floor is yours. Just a second, we are going to solve the technical issues right away.
Yes, please. No? You see me as well, and I can share now? Okay, do you see it now? Okay, our voice, the sound, the video is good. So thank you and for the introduction that I haven't heard fully, but good afternoon. So I know I have 20 minutes, I will try to stick to the time and give you that introduction. Let me know if there is any technical problem because I don't see anything, so I'm a bit in the dark, but I trust it will work. So first of all, thanks for the invitation for IAGP to present there. So I think it was during the introduction that I will target the regulatory landscape. Maybe as a quick introduction, just who we are. So IAGP represents the self-care industry. So what is the self-care industry? For us, it's the manufacturing. So we represent manufacturers of medicines, non-prescription medicines, food supplements and self-care medical devices. So just to give you a flavor, we have companies and associations, national associations in our members. What do we do? I mean, our main mission is definitely to advance responsible self-care. So I'm sure you know as pharmacists what is self-care, so I will not necessarily elaborate so much on that from, let's say, more the pharmacist perspective, even though I may touch a bit on it. But of course, you know the role it has as well in contributing in sustainability in healthcare system. So in a couple of numbers, what I wanted to present to you is definitely that if we look at packs of medicines, 1 out of 2 is actually non-prescription, so it's still quite a lot of what is sold in pharmacies. Then if we talk about food supplements, mostly in the vitamin and mineral space, and also quite a lot of packs per year. Then if we talk about active principles in non-prescription medicines, it really varies from a country to another, but it's about 200 active principles. Obviously, you know the active principles even more than I do, but then the range of active principles that can be used in non-prescription medicines can really vary from a market to another. And in terms of conditions, therapeutic indication, we have differences as well, but I mean, it can go from allergy to migraine, etc. On the demand for self-care, and then I will really dig into the regulatory. So we have three main drivers for self-care, and COVID is really increasing that even more. First is definitely the self-awareness, and this potentially, as healthcare professional, you're really aware of this increase, and I'm sure your generation is one of those that has the most uptake on what it is and how you engage in that as daily citizen. Then the second part is the aging population, where definitely there is a need for more prevention and self-care aside from the rest of the healthcare system. And the last but not least is the Internet of Things, with a lot of development in that space, talking about apps and softwares, which obviously increase a lot the uptake on self-care. So my point is definitely not to talk right now about self-care in too much details, because I'm sure that's potentially a part which is also more from the pharmacist talk. I will really want to dig into what do we need to unlock the potential of self-care when we talk about the products. And I mean, obviously, you have a lot of those, like I list 7 of them that are really well known, and definitely the role of pharmacists is really key in that uptake as well. I talk about obviously community pharmacists, but also not only, because pharmacists have also a huge role in the development of products. But health literacy is for us a key enabler. But what I really want to focus for today is how do we make sure that the regulatory framework that is actually regulating those products allows them to be marketed and to basically be appropriately marketed, so in a safe way, without misleading, and obviously with some efficacy. So on the regulatory status, because when we talk about what do we do and how do we regulate a self-care product, the main question is what type of product it is. And this question is not an easy one. So if we take what you have in the pharmacy shelves, you have different types of consumer health products, and we would name it. And obviously, ISP is not covering all of them, so I put in bold the one we represent, non-prescription medicines, device, and food supplements, but you also sell there a lot of cosmetics, food for specific groups. I think obviously of formula for infants, for instance. You also sell individual diagnostic, which can also be self-care, and also biocides, particularly, I don't know, mosquito reports, etc. So in that space, all of them are regulated really differently, meaning that they are placing on the market completely differ in terms of procedure, composition, marketing, labeling, everything actually differ. So the key question for us, if we focus on 3 categories, the key question is, what is it? And how is it regulated? And when you develop a product, this is definitely not a straightforward question, because when you develop a product, you ask yourself, what's the therapeutic indication, or at least the use from a health benefit I want to target, and offer a solution. And then you come up with a solution, which is formulated with a dedicated way of acting. And based on that, you have to ask yourself again, okay, but what is it actually? Because potentially you have targeted it as a device or as a supplement, but what it actually does, or how it actually acts, or how you want to present it, makes it different. So the key question is, first, to determine the regulatory status. So is it food, medicine, or device? And then you will define how you have to comply with the law. So what is really important in that case is also to know that you have a lot of borderline cases, meaning that the question, what is it, is not a straightforward question and neither a straightforward answer. So I'm trying to give you here a bit of hints on what would be the, let's say, intellectual or legal rationale, but which has a lot of scientific input in there, to define and to understand why they are regulated differently. The first concept is that when you get a product, you have to look at it individually. So that's a legal principle that you have to look at it case by case. You may know a similar product that has the same active principle, for instance, and normally it should be regulated the same way. But it's not only always the case, because you may still have part of the formula which makes it potentially be regulated differently. Or you may also have a claim which completely impacts the regulatory status. So I will really try to give you that clarification, because for us it's really key in driving the regulatory landscape. So case-by-case assessment of each product. And in that concept, what is really a cornerstone of the discussion is it acting primarily by pharmacological, immunological, or metabolic means? So does it exert those properties, and is it the primary function of the product? And already there, I'm sure you know quite a lot about what are pharmacological, immunological, metabolic properties or means, but that is not an easy definition, and I'm sure you may still have discussion within yourself for some products as to what is actually fitting that definition, what is not. So then the question is it principal or not? And potentially still, depending on what else is in the product, you could still have an impact on the final classification. So clearly focus on what we call the PIM means. So trying to put that in a simplified chart, if we talk about our 3 product categories, obviously we can add biocides and cosmetics and others. But if we try to simplify, the key questions are really, first, is it a medical purpose or is it not? And with medical purpose, we mean a therapeutic effect. So in the case of a medicine or a medical device, both of them have a therapeutic effect, a medical purpose. They treat, prevent, or diagnose a disease. That's a simplified version of it. We can be a bit obviously extensive on the therapeutic effect. A food supplement cannot do that. So it can help to do things, the digestion, etc., but it cannot treat, cure, or diagnose anything. That's not its intended purpose. Otherwise, it's become medical and it can no longer be a food. The same rationale applies for cosmetics. And then between a medicine and a device, the key question, because both of them will have a medical purpose or a therapeutic effect, will be, as mentioned earlier, what's the principal intended action? Is it achieved or not by the pharmacological, immunologic, or metabolic means? This is primarily important because under EU law, you have to make sure that you comply with the definition, because by default, if you have 2 definitions that are met, and at least you can meet both definitions, medicine and device, medicines will apply and not to the device. So that's really an important question because that's how you really finally decide. So then I'm going to try to give you a quick view on what are the differences between the 3 categories in terms of rules that apply to their formulation and placing on the market. So first, we need to really dig into the definition. What is a medicinal product? And I'm sure you're really familiar with the medicinal products on a daily basis in terms of like how it operates and interacts with the body. But from a legal standpoint, what makes it a medicinal product is first, and that's what potentially I'm sure you know best, the function, so how it acts. So basically any substance or combination that is used to administer to human beings with a view to restore, correct, modify physiological function, and by exerting pharmacological, immunologic, or metabolic action. So that's the function, or a diagnosis. But the other part, which also makes it a medicine, is basically the presentation. So even though you do not act like this, so let's say, for instance, I don't know, let's take the case of a vitamin, which at lower doses potentially is unable to actually function as a medicine, but still you make a claim. So you basically present it as having properties to treat or prevent a disease. In that case, you make it a medicine anyway, even though it doesn't act as such, but just the presentation can make it all as a medicine. So now let's focus really on, you have an active principle, which is acting primarily by pharmacological action, and you have different ways to authorize it. And you have 4 procedures, basically. 3 out of 4 are national, so they are really led by national authorities, while 1 is centralized at EU level. This is important because obviously you have a different market access. In one case, you will go first in one country and then get it recognized by other countries, but it's still a step-by-step process. And in the last case, you basically get it centralized and authorized in all member states in one go. For non-prescription medicine, it has a lot of importance because actually the switch, and I will just come to that, so making it non-prescription and not prescription, is basically most of the time a national decision. And let's say the exception in the central switch, and we have only up to now 6 examples that you see listed there, And we have two recent ones, which is not so bad for prostacyclin and desloratadine, but basically for most of them, it's still done at national level. So talking about switch, so really the concept of switch, as we call it, is really switching from prescription to non-prescription. So you still have to have a history of prescription use to justify the non-prescription authorization. Nonetheless, in terms of what makes it a non-prescription and why are we authorized to use it in a non-prescription space, it's interesting to see that by law, actually, all medicines should be non-prescription. And it's basically if you meet one of those four red criteria that you actually become prescription. But in practice, it's obviously kind of by default that you are prescription, and then you become non-prescription after some time. So those four key elements that you have to demonstrate are not a risk, are really what is needed to not make it to be non-prescription. So I will try to really quickly give you an idea on that. So the direct or indirect danger, you see here a bit of how it is meant by law and by guidance. What I want to insist on, because it's not my purpose to go in the details, is just to show to you that those elements that you may dig deeper if you are interested in the regulatory affairs of non-prescription medicines are really subject to interpretation. And you can definitely imagine that not only when we talk about misuse or abuse of the medicine, that obviously depend on a lot of factors, and that can really be a big objection sometimes to become non-prescription. And that is really linked to a lot of national perception on it, culture, notably the role of pharmacists and how citizens and patients are used to communicate or to use information provided by the pharmacist in general has a lot of role on how those risks are perceived by the regulators. So just on injectables, obviously, because it's a different route of administration. So the key message I wanted to say there is that we have legal factors, but the practice shows definitely that medical culture, healthcare system, also the way you obviously reimburse or not, the risk aversion, which is mostly cultural as well, and the patient empowerment in general has a lot to do with actually the self-care market for non-prescription medicine. So in that context as well, for us it's really important that as pharmacists you really get to understand the role you play there, because basically the more you are capable as pharmacists to also transfer that knowledge to increase health literacy, the more you also allow less risk aversion and potentially allow risk mitigation just by the way you act as a pharmacist. And that also helps in access to self-care. So that's quickly the database that we have. Now I want to move, because I said that I had a lot of slides, so I'm going to try to stick to the time. On device. So here, contrary to medicines, we are basically still having a therapeutic purpose. So we do diagnosis, we prevent, we may treat, etc. But the key difference is the last part. We do not act primarily by pharmacological, immunologic, or metabolic need. It can, though, assist the device, but it cannot be the primary function. And here, contrary to medicines that are prescription or non-prescription, which obviously drives the distribution channel, for device, you have four classifications that are risk classification, but what will be self-care, meaning distributed without prescription, available in pharmacies, without, or even in supermarkets, if I think about plasters or condoms, will not only depend on the risk class, but actually also national rules related to what they allow as a omnichannel distribution or not. Importantly for you, and just in the context of like separating between the three categories, what I wanted to insist on is this new concept, which is not so new anymore, but which is most of the time new to pharmacists, substance-based device. So what is it? It's basically a product that looks like a medicine, that is made of substances, that has a therapeutic effect, but it doesn't act primarily by pharmacological, immunologic, or metabolic means. And that's the major difference. So what is it, basically? And that's where we struggle, and I know as pharmacists you are highly and actually involved in that, because you are well represented in regulators, in industry, notified bodies. And so in that context, you also have a huge role to differentiate between them, because basically the difference really lies with how it acts. So if I talk about those products, for instance, we take them one by one. I cannot tell you that all eye drops, of course, will be device or medicine. This is again a case by case. You will have to look at the formula and how it is presented. But some of them will definitely be devices, even though you invest them or you make them penetrate the skin with a therapeutic effect. And I will try to be slightly more specific. Then you have different rules, but what I wanted to draw your attention to is that where the legislation makes it difficult for you then, in practice and for all of us, is that the law has defined that you can be a device even though you are systemically absorbed by the body to achieve your intended purpose. And that, if it's not by pharmacological or immunological metabolic ways, is potentially still a device. And I know from a pharmacist mindset, this split is not a straightforward split. This is not straightforward to anyone, but this is important because that's where the law meets the science and where the science also has to allow implementation of the legislation. So that's one of those challenges that we have to live with in the device space. So really quickly there, you have examples of devices like, here I have a sodium solution, or some fat absorbers, for instance. You can also talk about eye drops for hydration, or I would take as well the oral administration for treatment of obesity, like glucomannan, etc. That would be considered as device because even though you ingest them, they are not necessarily systemically absorbed. They may just absorb, like for instance for the fat absorbent, they may just absorb without necessarily be intended for the effect to be systemically absorbed. So all those differences really would make the difference with the medicine, even though from the outside it will look like the same, and the therapeutic indication is really similar. So moving to food supplements, because I don't have much more time and I still have a couple of minutes for the questions. So the food supplements is the last bit which is not for medical purpose. So it's a food. A food supplement is a food, but it is presented in a concentrated way. So in dosage form, just like a medicine, and that's the difference. So it's a food, it's supplementing a normal diet, it cannot treat a disease, it cannot be a therapeutic function, it's only nutritional or physiological effect, but then its form, because it's concentrated, is really confusing, possibly if it's not properly done, with the medicine. And that's the important part, because basically you cannot have a food supplement that looks like a bagel or a pastry. That's not possible. It has to be really a concentrated source of nutrients. Food, contrary to medicines and devices, are really regulated. So food supplements are regulated like any other food in terms of general requirements with hygiene, labeling, pesticide residues, etc. Plus, they have really specific rules related to what they contain in terms of nutritional content and specific labeling. It is also, it's not subject to a marketing authorization procedure, contrary to devices as well, which are subject to certification, pre-marketing, except for class 1. Here, it's really notification in most of the countries, but notification is more an information thing rather than a pre-authorization thing. And in some countries, you don't even have pre-marketing action per se. Also, harmonization is quite different. So for medicines, you would have a really harmonized system, but you would still have national authorization, notably to get it non-prescription, but it's still pretty centralized. For device, it's a certification system, but it's still like a one door for the 27 member states. For food supplements, it's really a patchwork. So for food supplements, it's really one market after another, and you have to potentially readjust the formula and the labeling. So that was really just to give you a snapshot of the various regulatory framework, and just to explain to you that definitely for self-care, in addition to obviously all the, let's say, health literacy, the healthcare network, the patient uptake and empowerment, and all those tools, What we also need is a proper regulatory framework, which is well understood, because it's good to have laws, but if they're not well understood, it's not really having any impact. And it has to be properly implemented. So, and to be properly implemented, all the actors, and for me actors mean regulators, mean healthcare professionals, mean patients, mean everybody, as long as we understand the rules and why they are implemented like this, there is a chance that the rules can allow a proper framework. But I think I will stop there just on the one opening, just saying that we have at EU level currently a lot of changes post-COVID. The pharma legislation is being reopened. Many things are put on the table to potentially adjust what has not been properly working. So potentially we can also expect some changes in the coming years. And I will stop there. So I can take up any questions. Hope it was clear.
Thank you a lot for your very interesting presentation. Now we'll proceed with some questions from the room, as Mons cannot stay with us longer. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. And before that, I would really ask all of you to wear your masks properly, and because we are future healthcare professionals and we should act accordingly. Thank you. Are there any questions? I see one question in the middle. So, Mario? Mario? Is the question there on the third row in the middle?
Yes, I had a question about the harmonization. Would you think it's beneficial for the quality of the self-care products, or would you prefer that it's the way it is? Because you said there were 4 authorization routes, and which one do you prefer, like the centralized one?
So I hear a question that I cannot really hear properly, so I will check.
Can you please clarify your question a bit?
Yes. So my question to you was, what's your opinion on the harmonization and centralization of the self-care products with regard to the quality of the products?
Yeah, it's still really far away. I'm really sorry. Can you write it, or can you get closer to a mic, because I cannot hear it properly?
Yes, someone will write it for you in the Zoom chat.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for that.
No, don't worry. So the question was, I hope, correct me, what is your opinion on the harmonization and centralization of the self-care products regarding the quality of them? That was your question? Did you hear the question, Molly? Islami will write it in the chat.
Okay, so no, I got it. So I will try to repeat so that you can correct me. So my opinion on centralization of self-care product authorization. So you would mean by that a centralization of the 3 categories, harmonization and centralization of the self-care product. Yeah, okay. So, and when you say self-care products, for the person asking the question, you really refer to the 3 categories that I presented: medicines, devices, and food supplements?
No, to the authorization routes.
She was referring to the authorization routes.
Okay. No, so then, let's say in an ideal world, you could try to centralize, but the problem is that since different products are doing different things, legally speaking, normally you centralize what can be treated the same way because it's kind of really similarly used. What I can say, because it's a really interesting question, it's a really difficult question. In the end, you cannot put into the same bucket all the self-care products that are sold in a pharmacy, because you saw in my slide, like potentially you have 7 or 9 categories of products that are really different and that can be sold in a self-care context, so from the cosmetics to the infant formula. So the quality that you expect is also depending on what you are trying to do with it. So even though what all products have in common is safety, the requirements for how you decide that a product is safe are still slightly different depending on how you use it. And that's why this is a really difficult question, because even though I think we can easily say that when you compare the quality of an ingredient, like let's talk about a vitamin, for instance. I would say that in practice, the quality and specification of a vitamin substance, a chemical substance used as a vitamin, that you would use in a food supplements for a medicine, in practice, normally it should make sense that it would be about the same molecule with the same type of quality. Nonetheless, what you can still, and you cannot really basically forget, is that in the case of a medicine, the target will be a patient. And you know better than me that a patient is potentially more vulnerable than a healthy population citizen, which will normally, if you take a medicine, you're in a patient mode, kind of. So you really present some pathology and disease. And that's the rationale to make it a medicine and to treat the quality for a vulnerable patient. In the case of a food supplements, we can still argue that, and this is what's happening. Normally you take a food supplement when you're healthy and you just want to reinforce, let's say, your immune system, etc. But then you are not in the same vulnerable position than the patient. So the question, legally speaking, and that's why it's not easy to harmonize and centralize, is since you are targeting in one side the patient more vulnerable and in another side a healthy population as part of the food space, how can you really harmonize that? Because you are not really addressing the same state of human body, right? So just like you would differentiate between patient and non-patient as a healthcare professional, I would say legally we have to do the same. We cannot really consider that they are exactly the same, even though we have to aim for the top quality, etc., and potentially they are used in similar conditions. I do hope it's some explanation, but.
Thank you a lot. Indeed, it makes everything more clear for us. I would like to thank you a lot for being with us today and for taking the time. We enjoyed a lot your presentation. And hope to see you
Thank you very
soon.
much. Have a good congress then. Bye-bye.
And now I would like to invite on the stage our next speaker, Jackie von der Schep, who is the co-founder and CEO of the NEO Pharma, and he will be talking to us about the innovation in pharmaceutical industry. Thank you a lot for being with us.
Okay. You had a fun day today. I was here this morning already on the workshop. It was really fun to have some of you very interactive with me on interesting stories in pharma. So talking about innovation in pharma, it will need probably 1 or 2 days to go through that type of topic. And I entitled my talk by saying, is it the beauty or the beast? Because, you know, as you will see, we are a normal industry. We have investors, we have clients, we don't call them clients, the patients, the doctors. But at the end of the day, we have products to produce, we have people in organizations, so we are similar to another industry, but we are dealing with healthcare. And that makes us very particular, and the timelines and the regulatory aspect, of course, are much different. Here is, in the past, what we contributed somehow also to the life expectancy. As you can see on this graphic, you know, with all the discoveries, some of them were diagnostic tools, you know, the microscope, an immense change, you know, in the way we are appreciating therapeutic modalities. And then came insulin, came the antibiotics, came the elucidation of the genome. I will probably come back and talk about that also. And ultimately, you know, we have the chemotherapy that started changing the picture in cancer. And you will see with some examples that I will bring that it's only the start of the era of good health. But at the same time, we started to be eating less well. So we created, in fact, new diseases. Everybody has heard about steatosis, non-alcoholic liver steatosis. This is called NASH. In fact, for a Frenchman, it's foie gras. We are supposed to eat it when it's coming from duck. But when it's in a human, it can be very detrimental because it contributes to ultimately get fibrosis, cirrhotic liver, and ultimately cancer. So we, with our new way of life, have at the same time created new disease. But definitely, our industry contributed very well in the past. So why don't we have this kind of image? In fact, very, very often we are trading almost as bad as banks in the public image. And as you can see, this is a study from Gallup in the poll, you know, about the image of the pharma industry. And as you can see, we were barely positive. And we are starting to get more and more negative in the public perception. So why is that? Is it because of scandals? Yes, we had some scandals. Which industry didn't have scandals? But I can assure you, it's a large, little minority. The larger part of the industry is really playing by the rules. Is it because of profit? We do profit. And you will see in my talk that if we don't get investors, we will not make profit, but we will not make good drugs either. Is it because of the pricing? It's an issue. It's a debate. But you will see that also here, that the cost of bringing a compound on the market is usually between 1 and 2 billion, and it doesn't include the failure. You have to pay the failures. The product that never arrived on the market, which is probably very, very, very probable when you start working on a product in this industry. Lobbying, yes, you heard about these things in lobbying to avoid new regulation, blah, 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 blah. So there are headwinds on this industry, but I would also like to show you the beauty of that industry and how we contribute to really a better health and a better healthcare. First of all, I think I borrowed that slide from a Novartis presentation. Well, I spent 20-something years at Novartis and then 5 years at Roche, two of the companies that are in the top 5 of the pharma industry. So basically what you see on this slide are 3 key messages. First of all, if you see about when you start working on an idea, what we call a target. You want to take care or inhibit a receptor or an enzyme or promote some receptors, etc. You start working on an idea and you start screening molecules. You can start screening 10,000 and we screen sometimes millions of molecules. And at the end of the day, maybe one is making it to the market. In other words, approved by the FDA or the EMA. This process is extremely high in failure rate and what we call attrition. We're losing a lot of products at the different stages of the development. We're losing products because they are toxic. We're losing products because they are just not efficacious or not enough efficacious compared to a product that is already on the market. And so there is an immense number of failures and attrition. And the last message I want to also to give you here is that look at the timelines. In some area, you can be, if you're really lucky, bring a compound within 5-7 years on the market before starting on the ID and developing a drug. Many compounds need 10-12 years to reach the market, and this to me, I know a lot of compounds that made it after 20 years. So they are even off patent, and we'll come back on the patent aspect in a minute. So this is basically what I wanted the message to be. We have a lot of failure rate. It costs a fortune, between 1 and 2 billion, and we have a lot of failures. And all of that has to be paid, of course. Competition. When I started in this business, no, I won't say the time. I'm an old guy, as you see. Well, I'm 35 in my metal. At the beginning, when you started the product, you had 5, 10 years when you had no competition. The competition now, when you have an idea and you come on the market, usually you're never alone. There is another company, if not a third one, that comes within 6 months or a year on the same market. So the competition has started to become very, very fierce. And there are stories also where competition could be deleterious because then you start cutting corners and then you avoid to look at some safety aspect. I don't know if you remember the big debate, the big battle between Vioxx and Celebrex. These were aspirin replacement, if you wish. We call that COX-2 inhibitor. And basically, this wiped out almost Merck because they were head-to-head and they wanted to be the first. And they probably cut corner. Is it true? Is it not true? There's still a debate about that. These are two examples, recent examples, where you see that for the same target, in other words, either the enzyme or in the case of biology, with hepatitis C, two products come almost at the same time. And immediately it has an effect on your profitability and on the price. So this is the type of field in which we are moving in this industry today. And more recently, something that everybody has heard because it impacted so much our life during the pandemic, new technology came with mRNA, with the vaccine. Two companies came, fortunately for us, at the same time. Moderna and BioNTech. BioNTech, you know, had a Pfizer behind their back, but basically, they came at the same time. It illustrates how the competition, is going in this industry. I profit to talk about the pandemic and the problem we have with this bloody virus. You know how many projects for vaccines have been initiated? More than 100. Not many of them will ever see the market, I can tell you. But there are a lot of investors that put a lot of money in that will probably lose it. So this is also something people should understand. If we don't get investors taking the risk, we will never get there. And for the pandemic, there was no doubt. There was a flood of money that was poured to try to get rid of that money, of that virus because of this. Patent, intellectual property. Innovation is synonym of protection. We are in this industry living on a special rule that is 20 years protection. So usually when you file a patent, we do what we call a priority filing. You start putting a stack in the sand to say, oh, my ID is already registered with this date. After roughly 1 year, you file really, so you can still improve your patent during 1 year. And then you have 20 years. Now 20 years, this is not when you come on the market, this is when you just file your patent. And you lose basically the research and development time to bring it to the market. And as I mentioned, it's between 8, 10, 12 years, sometimes even more. So in other words, when you reach the market, in many cases you have only 7, 5, optimally maybe 10 years on the market where you are protected before the generic can come in. In other words, the copy can come. Now, if you are really losing too much time, you can ask for a supplemental, and usually you can get 5 years extension, but you have to argue. But this is also something. Yes, we have patents, but their life is not so long compared to the problem we face and the length we have to face for the development of a drug and to bring it to the market. Now I will move to some of the, what I call the breakthrough inventions or innovations that were, that appeared, Some of them from the past, which are impacting immensely the current healthcare system and the current therapeutic modality. We're not talking about drugs anymore. Drugs usually was associated with a small molecule like aspirin, to make it simple, or paracetamol, because many of us take that also. And basically these are small drugs. Now we moved to a new era, which started 20 years ago, something like that. I have the history. This morning I showed you another slide with the whole history of the development of the monoclonal antibodies. When we started, there was one company that was a bit pioneer. This company, probably you know it, it's called Genentech. This was the largest biotech in the world. And when they started, nobody believed. Nobody believed. First of all, can you imagine, this is complex molecules, these are proteins. You have to produce them, they look complex. You have to engineer them, the quality has to be stable, etc. So they were facing an enormous number of challenges. There was one company, Big Pharma, who got the gut, the courage to invest in this company, to almost acquire it, but they let them run separately. This was Roche. And I remember at that time how in the area of the pharma business, people said, these guys are completely nuts. Never, ever, it will reach the market and it will be a product like what we're used to have. So, uphill battle, breakthrough therapy. Today, I think the first compound were Rituxan. I don't know if you've heard about this compound, which did several billion market sales. Then they did Herceptin, which is so important for breast cancer. And if you look at the new compounds coming to the market or registered today, 40% of them are antibodies. 40% of them are antibodies. And they even imagine new, better antibodies today, especially in cancer. On one of the arms, they put a linker with a toxic compound, and they target the antibody only to tumor cells. So your other cells are not impacted, so it's pretty safe. But when it reaches the tumor, the antibody is internalized, releases the toxic drug for the tumor, and it kills the tumor. There are many drugs coming here with this kind of approach now. There is another approach where the two arms, which are supposed to go to one target, go to two targets to make it more sure they go to the right cell. We call that bispecific antibody. This was an immense and incredible breakthrough, and it's still one of the most important therapeutic modalities. I cannot not talk about kinase. Back to small molecules. When we started working on one of the predecessor companies, the Ciba-Geigy, that became Novartis, when the guy started to work on kinase inhibitors, everybody in the chemistry space said, never. Will never work. Will never work. Until Gleevec made it to the market. There was a famous rare disease called leukemia, called Philadelphia chromosomes, and in CML, where these kinases are just going wrong. You don't control them anymore. They are going too fast. So we needed an inhibitor. But everybody said, no, it's not possible. Gleevec was the first inhibitor reaching the market. Since there, again, probably 30% of the current drugs are in the kinase space that are registered every year. So the breakthrough made it happen for others also. Now, a little bit more recent stuff. And I like this example because I don't know if you heard about the CAR-T. The CAR-T is an incredible, because this is the ultimate personalized medicine. It's science fiction at the beginning. You take blood from your patients, you extract the T cells, the famous cells that are supposed to help you fight against tumors, against infection, etc. You engineer the cells in vitro to bring a new gene inside that is targeting specifically some tumors. You expand these cells and you re-inject them in the patient. So it's what I call a kind of allo transplantation. It's an equal one. You can imagine the process we had to develop for this kind of, and the cost, and the quality aspect. At the beginning of that, I can tell you, I discussed with some of the CEO, R&D heads, etc. I said, never will we get a return on the investment. It's cost. We cannot ask for the price it costs really. So we have to work, and we're still working on the process to make it. I wouldn't say absolutely profitable, but not losing money, because this is an incredible science fiction example of what's happening already, and it's absolutely science fiction because it's re-engineering your own cells and re-injecting them. It's a fantastic innovation, and we'll probably hear much more in the past, in the future of this kind of. Another one that we hear a lot, you heard recently a lot about immuno-oncology. By the way, I'm talking a lot about oncology. You realize that? Maybe a little parenthesis about my talk. Many people tell me, well, you know, oncology, we have access to tumor. And during a long time, they said tumor. Until some of the new aspects came by also Roche, you know, you heard about a compound called Avastin. Avastin doesn't target the tumor, it targets the host. And now if you look at the approaches, immuno-oncology starts in that, we're not only looking at the tumor type, we're looking at the host. And we made so much progress in understanding the host response to the tumor that we have alternative options to do therapeutic interventions. I wish we would learn at the same speed in other diseases, be it cardiovascular, be it one disease area which is somehow neglected because it's a graveyard of products and companies in the central nervous system. So here I talk about immuno-oncology. Immuno-oncology, you see on the cartoon on the left side, your T cell normally they anchor the tumor and they start willing to do their job, killing the tumor, or inducing the killing of the tumor. But the tumor very cleverly adapted and finally find a way to block the T cells to do their work. We call that T cell exhaustion. And that was done with the PD-L1 and PD-1 receptor and bridges. So we invented, some people invented, antibodies against this PD-1 or PD-L1 to break that bridge or that break, if you want. To make, in other words, the tumor hot again for the immune system. This is what is happening currently. And I can tell you the first guys who did that, at the beginning they saw side effects. And they were almost close to stop fully the problem. One guy had the guts to continue, and he was successful, and we have 3 or 4 companies, we have plenty of companies developing that, but we have 3 or 4 projects on the market already currently that is making the difference. Now something even more in the future. It became a tool that everybody in molecular biology is using. You heard about the CRISPR-Cas9, which was discovered by I think an American lady and a French lady in the same lab. Gave them the Nobel Prize. And this is also science fiction. This is a scissor, a molecular scissor, where you can guide the scissor through a guide. That's what a CRISPR-Cas9. And then the enzyme changes the base pairs to repair or to change your DNA or a DNA portion. having opened that possibility is an incredible tool already in every lab doing molecular biology, but it's not yet a therapeutic. There are several companies trying to use that technology now and to use it to do gene therapy. We're not yet there, but I have no doubt that this will come. And everybody is using that technology. Making it a product is a challenge, but I'm pretty sure. Another topic of innovation that I was at the same time disappointed, because I was at the beginning of all the genomic era, you know, with my group. We were more specialized in what we call transcriptomics, in other words, the RNA part of the field. Some people were more on proteomics, and you look at all the genes that are moving up and down, overexpression, repression. You have tons of data, and how do you make sense of this ton of data? Now, molecular biology, you know, is looking at one pathway in a cell. I'm talking about the system that goes beyond the cell. I'm talking about the system that is the organ. The organ is not only one type of cell. And beyond the organ, well, the liver talks to the pancreas, talks to the muscles, and other organs. How do you integrate that in a bigger system? We are far, far, far over there. And I have big hopes that artificial intelligence and the, basically the big data aspect will help us in making a more comprehensive view of what's happening really. When I touch there with a tool, with an inhibitor or a promoter, what happens there? That would be so wonderful. So I think that we have a lot to do in the future to integrate it. It's probably bringing together mathematicians. It's not only biology. You need big data, as I said. You need computer power. We will see that evolving a lot in the future. Up to now, I was a bit disappointed, to be honest with you. I expected that much to me. But I'm pretty sure that with the new tools we are developing, also the mathematical and computer tools, we will. I worked the last 5 years before joining the biotech arena for a company that was personalized medicine. Personalized medicine, easy to say. The right drug for the right person. We started to look into that with my group and others from a safety point. We were looking at genetic makeup of people to avoid them to get side effects with drugs. The challenge of the future, of course, we are continuing to do that because that's very important. But do you know how many people in the room who got their DNA sequenced? So if you don't get that, you need a test on a specific enzyme or whatever gene to see if you have a mutation that will make you a problem if you take this drug or this drug, right? So I just wanted to bring that example because you need a test. So it's a combination of a therapy and a test that we'll be doing personalized medicine. Again, oncology. It's happening. Unfortunately, not everywhere. But in each big center, which was previously, you take a tumor of the patient, you cut it, you stain it, you look at the pathologist who look at it to tell you it's doing, it's bad, it's not bad. We are doing now sequencing of the tumor to guide the therapy where it should be the best. And it's not happening everywhere. So we will see a huge development of what we call companion diagnostic with the therapy. We are at the beginning. In oncology first, as usual, as I mentioned before, but I hope it's going to expand in other disease areas. And the ultimate goal would be to have what we call point of care. You don't want to wait 3 days or 3 weeks to get the result if you want to take a therapy, right? Especially not in very deleterious diseases. So you expect to have something in a couple of hours which are reproducible, specific, sensitive, so that you don't miss something and get a false answer. There is, you all heard about the company called Theranos?
Yes.
This was the rising star in Boston between 5 and 10 years ago. It was exactly that. A little device, you put a drop of blood, and half an hour, 1 hour after, you get the results. Wow. The CEO became, in almost nothing, a billionaire. Problem? It was not reproduced. And look at the press, what you can find on Theranos. I don't want to comment more on that. It was a disaster. But the idea was right. The idea was absolutely right. And it will happen one day. But it needs to be on a certain quality. We are a highly regulated industry. We cannot just say we bring things. It's a highly regulated. We need to be sure it's reproducible, batch by batch, etc. Quality is absolutely key. We don't discuss quality in this industry. And I will probably come to an end of my talk by saying, yes, we are talking about therapeutic modality, we're talking about diagnostic, but there are many other ways to look at innovation. You can make innovation on the molecule. I mentioned that. Now we have not only small molecules, we have drugs, we have etc. We have proteins, DNA, antibodies, God knows what, and there are probably others coming. Process. We can be innovative in manufacturing. Don't forget that after 20 years or more or less 5 to 10 years when you're on the market, there are generics coming. Well, we work on the price of goods, on what we call the cost of goods. Because that's the driver of the generic industry. They need to make profit, they need to have the less cost of production. So, of course, we do our part of the job to avoid them to have too much profit either. So that's definitely something. I mentioned the diagnostic test. On the molecule itself, there are many ways to look at them and to extend. I mentioned an example this morning, which in fact I fought against, where a company of an old drug found a way by making an ester to go to new patent. The ester was not stable and it was only under the drug. So I did the drug and got a patent and we went to the market. So you're always in this, innovation can be breakthrough, but can be also incremental. And I should not avoid to mention other type of innovation, pricing. Now there are people saying, well, we're going to, if it's not working in you, we're going to reimburse it. But take it, try it. It's a way to look at it. So that even in the pricing model, you start seeing innovation. You start seeing innovation in the collaboration model. I participated during 2 years at the general meeting between all the head of research and development of the big pharma. And we said, we cannot continue that way. We are reinventing the wheel separately every day on topics where we're not really in competition. But some of these guys all think, oh, we are better than the neighbors. You know? I take just one example. If you go to a clinical trial in a hospital or a company, you have your template of a protocol, clinical protocol. Every company has its own protocol template. You can imagine the nurses in the hospital who have to deal with 20, 40 different protocols and adapt several times on top of their normal job, what is the consequence? First of all, it's delays in time because they make mistakes. Second, mistakes is part of the variability, so you have to increase the number of patients in your trial. So we were working, and there is a kind of consortium company called Translator that tries to tackle exactly that between all companies. Something where we're not in competition, nothing to do with the product, but the process. Can we simplify and harmonize? There's a lot going on here. In silico design, I was mentioning before the artificial intelligence. what I would call in silico design or simulation. Modeling and simulation. There is no one Airbus or Boeing taking the first time off without having been fully simulating from A to Z. And don't tell me that it's less complex than technological drive. We are not yet there as industry, and we see that now coming up. Again, the new computers, the artificial intelligence, etc., will probably help us. There is a company here, I don't know if they are here in the room, I'm collaborating with in Lyon, simulating clinical trials. Instead of doing learning and confirming, which takes ages, etc., in real life, you just use simulation computers to do as if you would do a clinical trial with thousands and thousands of patients in silico. This is tremendous power that is also coming, and there are not many companies doing that, I can assure you. There are maybe a couple of them. And the one in Lyon is one of the leaders in that field. So, I hope I gave you an overview of why it's important for us to continue to innovate, what are the challenges, but without innovating, I can tell you, the future is not very bright. I think it's bright for those who will continue to innovate, and I will not go through all that list of topics that I started to talk about, but the last one is an important one. We need to attract investors that will not get returned before a long time. If it's not high risk, high return, why would they put their money in this industry? Why wouldn't they put their money in another industry? So we need really, really big investors. This has a cost. This is part of the cost the healthcare system should afford, because otherwise we will not make progress. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for your interesting presentation and for being here with us today. I'm not sure if we would have time for questions now, because we have one more presentation. But in case we do, we'll take all of them at the end if it's fine for you. Yes, exactly, if we would have the time for you. And now I would invite on the stage our last speaker for the day, Pierre Pouget, the Vice President of France Biotech, and he will be talking about the issues surrounding the development of biotechs and medtechs and how these companies are participating in the pharmaceutical revolution. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be with you this afternoon. So I will try to cover the health tech ecosystem, but many things will be in parallel with the talk before. But it will be from the perspective of biotech, medtech, and e-health. Okay, so first, what is health tech? Health tech is biotech, so the medicine, small molecule vaccines. It's medtech, medical devices, diagnostic tests, stents, radiology equipment, and it is also something which is increasing a lot recently, which is e-health, digital. So, and it has been increasing with the COVID crisis, and especially teleconsultation solution, and as we talked before, drug discovery solution, AI devices for diagnostic, and software. Now, what is a health tech company? It's quite difficult to define, but there are some characteristics about health tech companies. First, from a scientific and medical point of view, health tech use breakthrough technology to develop first-in-class products to address high unmet medical needs. So this is something very important. The second thing is from a social point of view, it changes drastically the life and the management of the patients. From an organizational point of view, health tech are organized around a strong and efficient team, seasoned team, dedicated to optimize the costs of the health tech and the time to market. In the US, we say, what do you prefer to invest to, the jockey or the horse? In health tech, we invest in both. You have the best jockey and you have the best horse. And from a financing point of view, generally health tech do not have revenue. So the valuation of health tech is based on future cash flow once the product is on the market. And CFO and CEO, both of them, spend at least 30% of their time to meet investors through different ways, but really they spend this time with investors. And the relationship with investors is key, not on the short term, but you need really to have a strong relationship with those guys, and they need to trust you. There is a part of special relationship that you need to really build on. So, biomedicines currently represent 50% of the clinical trials and are expected to represent 32% of the drug sales in 2024. So you see the weight today of biotechnology. Example of biologics, you have, it was, I said before, you have mRNA, vaccines, recombinant proteins, antibody, gene therapy, cell therapy, all of that is biotechnology. Before 2002, I mean, before we were discovering, before the human genome was mapped in the US, biotechnology, if you look at this index of biotech index in the US and the world, it was rather flat. And since then, it has increased by 60 times. While the index for pharma was growing slowly, went after decreased a little bit and is growing slowly. But the gap of the index between pharma and health tech is huge today. And in 2019, 350 million patients benefited from biotechnology-derived medicine worldwide. Okay, a case of medtech, which is successful, is Carmat. So it's a French company, founded in 2008 by Matra Defense, which was Airbus at the time. Dr. Philippe Politi from Teufel Capital and Professor Alain Carpentier, over 12 years of research. This is really a scientific breakthrough. This is autonomous prosthesis, which target the patient with terminal heart failure, some of the patients waiting for a full heart transplant. They got the CE mark quite recently, December 2020, and they have started to sell this artificial heart already in Germany and Italy. So what about health tech in Europe? In Europe, there's around 30,000 biotech companies. This is translated by around 17,000 jobs and direct jobs and 700 indirect jobs in the healthcare industry. Why? Because health tech industry has a special ecosystem, so you maximize, actually you have the necessary people inside the company as employee, but you are using a huge network around you of indirect indirect jobs. So it means, for example, the company I'm working with, we are 30 people, but if we are looking at all the indirect jobs, we should be at 200 people. So in 2019, 26% of the global biological manufacturing and 80% of the global vaccine came from the EU. So this is a quick pictures of France. In France, we have around 750 biotechs, 1,100 medtechs, and plus 200 health tech. health tech today are really increasing. So Paris and the Lyon region are the two main hubs we have here in France. Okay, regarding the ecosystem, I was telling you before about the ecosystem. So the ecosystem is from research to the market approval. And there's something very important at the start, which is the academic labs and the research institution, which can be private and which can be public. And in Europe, we have the chance to have very, very good research with very good products, with very good molecules, very good drug candidates. Now the issue is to translate that, is to transfer that to a biotech or to a medtech. And this is what we call transfer of technology. And at the time, IP is something very important. I will talk a little bit later about that. But from the start, you need funding. Even when you start your business, you need to talk with public bank in your country. You need to look for grants. You need to ask your family, your friends, and then after you go to the VC and so on and so on. So funding is something which is part of the plan. And then you are talking to a pharmaceutical company, to hospitals, clinics, CROs, CMOs, tech suppliers, and of course to the regulators. Okay, regarding the IP, if there's something you should keep from this talk is IP. IP is the value of the health tech is contained in the IP. So if you don't have a good IP at start, it's not worth continuing your business, right? Doesn't mean anything, because an IP is, from a financial point of view, is an option value. So you will exercise this option in the future, and this option needs to grow. So the role of the management team will be to magnify this value. So don't hesitate to cover as much as possible if you have, of course, the resources to do it, financial resources. And also get help from a renowned, an excellent firm, patent firm, that will help you, especially in the US, because US is tough, is a tough market for IP. It's also a question of timing. There is two strategies when you go for a patent. You can file the patent as quickly as possible. So the advantage is that you protect the invention and block competition to file. The disadvantage is that the clock is ticking already. Or you can decide to file when the product is more advanced, and you have to look at the competition, what is going on. And the advantage is a longer patent life. Yes, it's a longer patent life when on the market. But the disadvantage is that someone may patent something just before you, and everything is lost. The coverage should be wide in terms of geography, but also in terms of science. You need the coverage on chemistry, formulation, industrial process, anything you can patent it. And the duration of protection, 20 years after deposit plus additional protection. Variable insurance depending on the country, 2 to 10 years. And usually the attack from competition, they occur after the issuance of the patent. So that was said before. 3 main characteristics of a drug candidate. When you develop a drug candidate, it takes a long time. The probability of success, the POS, is very low, and it's very costly. If you look at that, are you going to invest in development of a product? Not really. So diversification is very important. Diversification is what do venture capital. They invest in a few companies, only a few. They invest in a bunch of companies, only a few will be successful. So we are more modest in the development cost. in biotech. If our benchmark, if you go straight for one indication from phase one, I mean from discovery to end of phase three, it should be around 300 million euro. But this is something when life is very easy. Life is never easy, first. And second, if you take into consideration the risk adjustment of that, usually if you want to put a product on the market, it's between 1 and 2 billion. So at the beginning, you will have grants, angel and seed. When you go to phase one, phase two, private equity, but private equity is more venture capital, will come. So those venture capital, they are fund between 100 million or 500 million, and they will decide to invest in your company, and they will take some shares in your company according to the pre-value of your company. So they become actually, if they are less than 50%, well, they don't own your company, but sometimes they take 60, 70. When you go to phase two, then you have the opportunity to go for an IPO. So you go to the public, you go to a stock exchange. In Europe, this is the Euronext. In the US, this is the Nasdaq. And you can have some, I mean, from preclinical, even discovery to phase three, you have the opportunity to discuss with pharma. And pharma at that time you can discuss licensing, and if the VC wants to go out, wants to exit, then it's M&A. IPO is not really an exit, because what we have the lock-up period. The venture capital and the investors, they cannot go out, they have to wait. And if you have a stock exchange like Euronext, which is not very liquid, it's very difficult to, if you have less liquidity, you have a discount on the value of your company. That's why Nasdaq is something that many companies are looking for. And especially at Euronext, I would say if you go for an IPO at Euronext, you can have 50 million euros of investments. If you go for the Nasdaq, it's between 100 and 200, so it's different. I will go 5 minutes. So we did this little questionnaire on polls at France Biotech to ask to the entrepreneurs, what is your main concern as an entrepreneur? And the main concern is financing, because many biotech or medtech, you have less than 1 year of cash, even sometimes 1 month of cash. So you really need to have a good relationship with investors, and your CFO needs to be very agile. So let's see a little bit about the difference between the US and Europe regarding financing. So this is a graph. So this is EY. Actually, that's numbers from EY. We work with EY from France Biotech. We work with EY for those kind of figures. So you see that in between 2009 from 2016, this is IPO and VC. From 2019 to 2020, what has been increasing in terms of investments. But what we see during the COVID crisis, between 2019 and 2020, we see that Europe was resilient. It's not bad, actually. It was a bad time, but resilient. Could stay at the same level of investment. This is not, refinancing is not included in this figure. Refinancing is when you do an IPO and after you want to get private placement or other, so it's secondary investment. This is not inside that. But anyway, we see that it's flat in Europe, and on the other hand, in the US, 25 billion to 30 billion. So a huge increase in the US between 2019 and 2012. And also you can see the gap, the huge gap between the US and Europe. So the countries where you have most investment, is UK, France, Switzerland, Germany, Belgium, Sweden, Netherlands, and these figures are between 2018 and 2020. You see the part of the refinancing is also very important. So I would split those companies in two boxes. United Kingdom, France, and Sweden are countries where investors are investing in a lot of projects, a lot of companies, but with a lower ticket. United Kingdom, Switzerland, and Germany, investors are betting a lot, as you see, are putting a lot on the table, but they are really targeting some companies, BioNTech, CureVac, on those companies. So they really target. So a few companies are taking the whole, most of the whole investment. Okay, this is IPO. So you see, same resilience between resilience for Europe, 1.7 billion, 1.7 billion between 2019 and 2020, and you see the US they just doubled their investment. It's huge, from 7 billion to 13.3 billion. This is due also to the fact that in the US they have introduced a new financial tool, which is a SPAC, Special Purpose Acquisition Companies. So this SPAC actually going to the IPO, and after they are buying companies. So this is really something that was kind of bubble in the US. It was happening first semester of 2021, but today it's going down. And in the US they use this engineering, financial engineering, to really boost the IPOs in health tech. So the place of Europe in the world, well, so this is IPOs between 2010 and 2020. So you see, 2.2 billion. Look at the US for the Nasdaq, 52 billion. If you take the New York Stock Exchange, they are roughly at 60 billion. And now China is around half of it, roughly 30 billion. Well, we have a long way to go. And you see here that most of the successful IPOs by European companies, out of the successful at more than 30 million euro, are all backed by the Nasdaq, roughly. So we pass on that to the VC. So for venture capital, you see around 6.7 to 6.5, so this is rather flat, and rather flat in the US. So the big deal between 2019 and 2020 is the IPOs in the US through the SPACs. Those are companies that you know, CureVac, BioNTech, that have raised a lot of money from VCs. Yeah, so this is the end of my talk, and do not hesitate to contact me if you need if you have any questions and you need answers. My last would say my conclusion would be that health tech and pharma in Europe needs really young talent, as you are, and you are the future for the European industry. Health tech industry, so I wish you good luck and the best for the future.
Thank you so much for your presentation and for offering us the perspective from biotech companies, because it's something we don't really learn about in our studies. Unfortunately, we don't have time left for panel discussion, so we will have just one more 5-minute presentation left, and then we will end. And tomorrow, I know it's hard, so I just ask for your patience for a few more minutes. And tomorrow we will also have coffee break, so you will have time to go for air. But before that, we have a last slide of question for you, so Marlene, we can activate that. based on all the presentations you heard, we will need again some small inputs from your side. What do you think pharmaceutical revolution means? Because you heard about a lot of types of revolution today, or innovation, but how did you understand it? You will get your break soon, I Digital advance, the future, yes. Same, I believe it's for the break, which I thought we will get. Any more ideas? Innovation I see as being the biggest word there, which is something that we kept repeating today. Growth, new solutions, new opportunities, rise of the role of pharmacists. So thank you a lot. I see that you have many ideas and you took a lot of learning out of the presentations, which I'm really happy to see. And now we'll move on to the last 5 minutes of this symposium, and I will invite Nova Discovery for a quick presentation.
Ще mundiales estão falando. Edine, acho que é Edine, sei lá.
So my name is Claire Couty, and I'm a biomodeler at Nova Discovery for 3 years after engineering school at Central Quebec. So I have a question for you. Sorry, this question in just 5 minutes. Have you already heard about in silico clinical trials? Yes. Can you raise your hand? Okay, so if yes, what will follow might interest you. If no, I'm going to tell you more about in silico clinical trials and Nova Discovery. So at Nova Discovery, we have biotech and pharma companies increase their clinical trial success rate. How do we do that? We simulate in silico clinical trials with virtual patients. So in silico refers to the fact that we use computer simulation for running these clinical trials. So you might wonder, why would we need in silico clinical trials? So the pharmaceutical industry faces different difficulties. The research and development time are extremely long, so 15 years in average from early research to market. The costs are extremely high, so you have 2 billion spent per drug, and the failures arrive quite late in the pipeline, so a loss of money is lost here. You can see 1 out of 10,000 molecules reaches the market. Also, with the COVID pandemic, pharmaceutical companies turned to other alternative solutions since clinical trials were impacted by the COVID. And if we go back to the US Congress, a mere 10% improvement in predicting failures before clinical trial could save a lot of money. So that's the why of NOVA. And what we offer is to establish in silico as the third pillar alongside with in vitro and in vivo and clinical pillars that you may know. So the idea is not to replace the actual current existing clinical trials, it's really to support them to run a simulation before they run in the real life in order to optimize their knowledge. So how do we do that? We build a disease model, we build a treatment model, and a virtual population that are based on knowledge found in the literature. And with these three components, we run an in silico clinical trial. And we can test many different hypotheses. So we can test different combination of treatments, we can test many scenarios and optimize the design of the clinical trial in order to increase the success rate. So a few examples, so we can, as I said, explore different targets. We can also explore the regimen of the drug, so the dose, the number of administration per day, the time between different doses. And another example is to identify subgroup of optimal responders and identify theranostic biomarkers. So the idea is to advise the biotech and the pharma company on the design of their clinical trial so that the success rate is the highest possible. Now I've presented you the how we can transform the R&D in drug development. I'm going finally to present you a Levi's story. So we are a fast-growing company. When I arrived 3 years ago, we were 25. Today we are 66. So we have a team of biomodelers. In this team, we have pharmacists, as I'm speaking to you today. We have engineers, we have doctors, we have biologists, so we're really interdisciplinary team. We have bioscience developers who are building a platform. It's the same as Netflix. Instead of the film, you can just run your clinical trials. And yeah, that's it. That's it, and we are recruiting in 2022. So if you're interested in silico clinical trials, you can visit our website, nevadasarreton.com. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you a lot for your presentation. And now we are over with the symposium, unless the reception committee has some logistical updates for you. Okay, I see there are none. So thank you for staying with us till the end. Thank you a lot for the speakers for joining us.